and that's when she was with Wrigley. So she's been in the market research industry for about 15 years, both on client side and supplier side. So she was at Wrigley most recently, and then she moved back to the dark side, supplier side. And now she's at RSG. And she speaks very frequently at MRIA events and other events too. We've had her on our panels before. She's a great speaker. And this is a presentation, Have I Got Another Story for You? And you'll notice that there's no computer, so it's really about storytelling. And that's what the conference was all about last year. So just to keep on that theme, it's about storytelling. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Amy Davies. Thank you. Hello.
Getting up on the stage here. Thank you so much, Jennifer. I really appreciate being asked to speak at this event. I know one of you at least was at my presentation at the MRIA, so I took the liberty of changing it up a little bit. And you might ask sort of what qualifies me to know how to advise my peers on this subject. I think there's a few reasons, or a few things, one of which is I've been in research for a very long time. I've been on both the client and the supplier side. How many people here have been on both? Yeah. You learn a lot going from one to the other. I'm actually selfishly writing 2 books at the moment. One will be just an ebook on career advancement, so a lot of stories in there, and one's a more personal book. And one of the things that I realized through the writing process is our lives and our experiences are merely a collection of stories. And it's interesting, I would invite you all to try to write your own story throughout your life. And it's quite interesting what happens and how you realize that every part of your life has all these little very interesting stories attached to it. Most recently, my daughter was inspired. We come from a mixed family, Jewish and Catholic. And as we were walking home during Christmas time, she was wearing a little a reindeer, like, you know, the little things you get at the dollar store. And she said to me, you know, Mommy, I think I'm Jewish. And I said, well, you're whatever you want. I mean, you have a lot of options. And she said, actually, I'm the Jewish reindeer. So now she's writing a book that the working title is Avi, the Jewish Reindeer. So we've got a lot of storytellers in our family. So, you might be wondering what you're looking at here. I did not know what order to put my slides in, so I decided to let you choose for me. So, this is going to be interactive, and I hope that you will ask questions along the way. Each one of these pictures has kind of a point or a story to it. So I'm going to ask you guys to choose. Remember those books that you used to have when you were young, that you chose the path the story would take? So consider it one of those. So, who's going to be brave and choose first? Which one? 17. 17. Perfect, because I can reach that one. I don't want to pull it all down, so we'll have to, I'm going to get someone to help me, but I'm also, can you reach that one though? Okay, so 17. I recently learned that we lie, and we lie quite a lot. In fact, 1/4 of our conversations that we have include a lie. And if you're in a relationship, like an intimate relationship, 1/3 of those conversations on average, we lie in. And I think the application that this has to research is many things. For one thing, you have to think about the interactions that you're having in the workplace. And these aren't always horrible lies. They're lies that could be very simple, like, yes, that, dress suits you perfectly, or, I really loved your presentation. Maybe some of you will say that to me after. So those sorts of things. So I think we have to consider that in our working life, both in the interactions we have with people, but also in the research that we do. Because if we're lying a lot, and we're sitting in a focus group with people, they might, and it's very likely, that they'll be doing the same thing with us. So our challenge as researchers, and certainly something that I do in my working world, is try to get to the answer without asking direct questions. And I think that's a really important way for us to look at research and our lives. The other really scary part about this is we have what's called a truth bias that's built in. So it's our way, because we do a lot of lying to ourselves, by the way. And it's one of the ways that we cope with life. Life, if you look at it, it's pretty grim. Like, all of us are gonna die, that's for sure. So that's hard to cope with. So we spend a lot of time lying to ourselves, just to get through life. So then what happens is when people look at us and they lie to us, we're more, or speak to us in general, we're just more inclined to believe them than not to believe them. It makes the work of people like judges very difficult, right? Because that's how we're just built that way. So that's that. Who's going to be next?
30, play fish.
Oh yeah, so this is actually a great one for this presentation. So many years ago, thank you. So you gotta make these things memorable. So plenty of fish. Many years ago, I worked for Rogers. And I'm sure David Purdy won't mind. I don't know if any of you know him, mind me sharing this story. But rightfully so, it's very difficult to capture his imagination and to get his attention. He was my primary stakeholder. I was presenting to his whole team. I was incredibly nervous. And I was having a lot of trouble, much like this presentation, putting the flow together. Because at that time, people were like, flow really matters. But I had this one slide that I tried to tell a story in a unique way because I needed to get his attention. And the slide was our head of digital, Jeremy Begris. I built him a Plenty of Fish profile for a heavy online user because he was the head of our online business. And I knew when I put up Jeremy's mock Plenty of Fish profile, I would capture David's attention. So what happened was I went into the presentation, I had taken it from almost the last slide in the presentation, and at the very last minute, I moved it right up to the beginning of the presentation. And what ended up happening was there was a glass wall at the back of the room, and he would walk out the door, and David was on his phone. And I was on my first slide, on my second slide, and there he was on his phone, watching but not engaging at all. And that Plenty of Fish slide came up, he put his phone down, he walked into the room, sat right in the front, and I had his attention for the next 3 years. So, when you're thinking about how to communicate a message, I would say, research can be boring. It can be really dry. How do we bring it to life for our stakeholders? And then how do we get their attention? And how do we communicate it in a way that we get their attention right up front? I do a lot of work helping people put together presentations, and one of the things I say is, try to talk to the content that you know as soon as possible. Because particularly if you're a nervous presenter, that will make you much more confident when you're giving your presentation, if you start off with what you know. Don't do it this way, because you never know what's going to come up if you're nervous. Okay, who's going to choose next? Yes?
14.
14.
That's a boring number.
It's not a boring number. The reason that it's up there is because there's a lot of ways to make numbers come to life and make them sticky. 4% is the amount of Aboriginals in Canada. 4% is the number of Americans there are in the world. 4% is the number of Americans who identify as gay, lesbian, or heterosexual, or bisexual. It's also the number of percent of 15 to 17-year-olds who smoke, which actually that surprised me, who smoke daily. Didn't think anyone did, but of course that's just me being naive. It's also the percent of people who are considered sociopaths. So, one person, maybe two in this room, but just be careful who you're sitting next to. But I guess the point of that slide is we are all dealing in numbers. How do we get 4%? I think that you might forget all the rest, but very few of you are going to forget today that I told you that 4% of the population are non-murderous sociopaths or psychopaths, so don't worry. But that's just one way to make the numbers jump off the page. When I really challenge myself to turn data into something visual as much as possible, while still staying true to the numbers. Next. Yes?
18?
18.
Steps.
That's one of my favorite ones. It doesn't look that exciting, but it is. So, is anyone else a runner in here? You don't have to be good. I'm terrible. But that's a staircase on the run that I do. And I run an average of 5 kilometers about 3 times a week, which isn't much. I do some 10K runs, like fun runs, but I certainly don't do that regularly. And that staircase is on my route. And as I was running one day, I was like, oh, you know what? This just isn't feeling like enough. I really need to get my heart going, because I do it so often. So I looked at that staircase and I said, I'm going up. This time I'm running up and down that staircase a few times. And I did that and it really boosted me. It's not just the way that I look at my exercise routines or my runs. It's the philosophy that I try to have in my life. And one of the reasons that I moved over from client to supplier side was because I needed that staircase. Like, I've been on client side for most of my career, almost a decade. And I thought, you know what, I love this, I love the function, but I'm just not learning anymore, and I'm not stretching myself. And that's why I ultimately made the decision to change course. And that's like a call to action that I would give anyone I speak to in this field, is make sure that you're constantly, whether it's the type of presentations you do, or the type of positions that you choose, or the type of people you approach and work with, I suggest like always thinking about having that staircase in your life and knowing when you need to run up and down it. Next. 19. Yes. So I've included in some of my favorite storytellers, and one of them is Malcolm Gladwell. Has anyone read any Malcolm Gladwell in here? Yeah. So, he is at heart a researcher, and what he's doing with his books is he's communicating the research that he's done and making sense of it for the world. But the beauty in what he does is how he communicates it. Because if you have one of your Malcolm Gladwell books at home, open it up later tonight, because you'll see that if you were 10, you could probably read the words on that page, and you could take some meaning from them. So what I love about him is he's accessible. And he makes the learning accessible. And I think that's our job as well, because we understand, some of us will understand a discrete choice, but our stakeholders and our clients won't understand it. So how do we make that information accessible to them? So as we're thinking about storytelling, certainly think about that. One thing that it just drives me crazy about the corporate world is that people think by making it complicated that it's going to make them look smarter. When I'm working with people like that, I just think, oh my goodness, if you were even smarter and more confident, you would make me be able to understand this. Does anyone watch, there's a show about consultants. I want to say it's not Game of Thrones.
House of Lies?
House of Lies, yes, thank you, yeah. If you've ever watched the very opening scene to that, it's amazing. He's just talking into the camera, and he's saying, he's throwing out all this business jargon, and you can't follow, and he's speaking really quickly, and then he looks at it right at the camera at the end and said, if you understood any of that, I'm not doing my job right. And I thought there was a really important lesson in that. Okay. 23? Oh, the TTC. Yes. Okay, who rides the TTC in this room? I ride it. Yeah. Have you noticed anything's changed in the last year? Presto, yeah.
It's faster.
It's faster, yes, it's definitely faster. Sorry, do you have backdoor access? Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry? Uber Hop, what's that?
Well, they add lines to where streetcars are running,
Okay.
and where there isn't enough service.
Yeah.
That's really compelled BPC to step up their services.
Right. And so you have noticed that their service has gone. Yeah, competition. Competition is always good.
Yeah.
So I have to give a lot of credit to Andy Byford and his team. I lived in England, in London. Did anyone? I said, yeah. I see. We're thinking the same thing, right? If you've ever ridden the tube in London, it's a whole different experience from here. But our experience is becoming closer. One thing we won't get as much of is all their lines. That's amazing. But they have probably through research and insight, whether it's just them traveling on the TC, whether it's the TTC, the letters that come in, they have realized the biggest problem on the TTC is communication. I mean, there's many other things they've improved. They have more trains flowing through, but when you're in the TTC tonight, as it looks like a lot of you will be, if you're riding on the subway particularly, that's what I take. Think of all the points of communication you get. When that train is delayed, they talk to you. They never did that before. You would be standing there wondering what on earth is going on. But now you have a very friendly voice that says, there is this happening at whatever station, and the train will be in shortly. And when that Bloor, or the Young and Bloor train comes in, they say, if you can't get on this train, don't worry. There's another train coming up, you know, from Rosedale Station. There's a very friendly woman who stands on the platform every single morning. And every single morning, she's interacting with people and brightening their day, really. She's wonderful. And you just see people everywhere. And they've obviously been trained or chosen because they're so good with people. So that was based on insight. And that's, to me, it's insight coming alive. And I just really suggest looking at that and seeing what's going on, because it is a much better experience. One of the things they do in London, which you might have noticed, is when you're riding the train, if you're standing and it's lulling for a bit, like it's stopped, there's a little ping that comes on just before it takes off again, so you know to hold on. So I'm waiting for that to happen, and when that happens, I'll feel like, oh, they really nailed it now. Okay, next.
Can I make a comment on that?
Sure.
And one thing that's really important to mention about how communication changed the service.
Yeah.
Notice it makes for a better ride, even though you didn't affect the service at all.
That's a really good point. Yeah.
Right? So
Yeah.
if you're going to be late with something or whatever, like we all are sometimes,
Yeah.
the communication of it might, even though you can't delay or you
Yeah.
can't speed it up, it may make the end user feel more taken care of.
Or in control.
Or in
too.
control,
Like I know
right.
what to do now. If I'm at Dundas
Right.
Station and we're going to be sitting here for 10 minutes, well, I can walk to my office afterwards.
Right. Right.
And now there's Wi-Fi in there, so.
Has anyone ever got it to work?
Yes.
Really? I can't get it to work.
It's only in the station.
Okay. I might ride the TTC with one of you guys. You must be really doing something wrong.
With your fingers.
Yeah. Yeah.
Get a quick text on.
Okay. Oh, good to know. I will keep trying. Okay. Who's going to choose next? Yeah.
Making a murder in 16.
Oh, yeah. Has anyone seen this?
Yes.
So those are the lawyers, Jerome Bunting and what's the other one's name? He's the one I usually remember. I don't usually remember. Strang. I can't remember. Dean Strang. So that to me is a tragic story. If you haven't seen it on Netflix, you know I'm a big fan of Netflix. I feel like I bring it up in every presentation. It's an 8-series, or I can't remember, 8, 10-series documentary about Stephen Avery. And it's a heartbreaking true story about a man who, with all the facts on his side, cannot seem to get justice. And his 2 defense lawyers, if any of you have ever had any brushes with the criminal justice system, you get to know criminal lawyers and you see these men are not used to feeling this much emotion when it comes to a case that they're working, and to see them so lost because they have all the facts and they just can't seem to make anything work. And I know it's an extreme example, but there are times in my career where I had all the facts and people just make decisions that go against what is so obvious to me in what I'm doing. So I guess it's a story where it is difficult when that happens, but that we just have to keep moving and do our best to keep steering everyone in the right direction. But sometimes we might lose. It's unfortunate, but it happens. Okay.
Expectation versus reality.
Oh, yes. So, you might not be able to see it, but in the top right-hand corner, there's a little Snow White, surrounded by the animals, who she calls over with her song, and they all look up at her admiringly. That's what I thought I would look like in my career as a child, right? I thought, that's what the career would look like. You become an expert in something, and everyone sort of rallies around and helps you out and builds you up. But you can't see it because it's hidden, but behind that is someone trying to fight off